Okay, so today we're looking at items and content out of chapter 11. And as I said, Tuesday we looked at formatting text with style. Some of the content that we looked at on chapter 10 was learning the before and after, how to choose your font family, specifying alternative fonts, basically between the specified font and the generic font and how it works down the list in the font list. We talked about font as a shorthand for font family. And font is actually a shorthand for a lot of different properties, if you remember. We talked about creating italics, bold formatting, line height, controlling spacing, applying text, changing text case, and so forth. Today, we're going to be looking at how we actually format the elements on the page. So this is the common layout that we're going to be trying to do today. What you see here on the right, we have basically a masthead at the top. This is the top of the page. We often call it our page header or our navigation area. Then we're going to be creating two columns. So you can see a column here and a column there. And then, of course, there's going to be a footer down here at the bottom. And this little image, it's very, very tiny, but it has a copyright statement there. So we're going to ease into the discussion of layouts by basically using what's called a fixed width layout. Now, next week, we're going to look at responsive, but fixed width is probably the easiest to kind of get into, to wrap our minds around how to do things. When you get to the place where you're building a website for the internet, of course, you could put a fixed width out there, but it's never going to work as well as a layout that is responsive. And again, I've talked about this many times, that your screens between a laptop and a tablet, a cell phone, all of those different types of medias, they'll change and squish the format if you're not careful. But again, today we're going to start with fixed width so we can wrap our heads around it. Okay, so again, big concept here. Separating content from your presentation, right? It's very fundamental to separate your concerns. Don't want to get them all mixed up. In software development theory, this is actually a term, a separation of concerns. In other words, it's keeping your content grouped together and only tied between content by some sort of reference. So we do that with HTML and CSS and images. We reference the content where it's located externally. So when we think about separation of concerns, it's like how you organize your bedroom or your office. Sometimes you think, oh, I'll just put everything in one place because it's easier to get to. But in reality, the bigger your website gets, the more convoluted it becomes. And trying to understand where everything is at becomes very difficult, especially if someone's going to come after you and they're going to be maintaining it. So a concern is a particular topic or a particular media type, right? So if we think about in the sense of web development, one media type is HTML, another one would be our images, another one would be CSS, and another would be JavaScript. Now, with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you could certainly put it all on the same page. And there may be, at times, reasons to do that. But we want to separate our content from our presentation. We want to make sure that our CSS is stored in a different location. Again, this is for ease of management. Okay, so the two types of layout approaches. Again, we have fixed width pages and we have responsive. Our goal is to get you to responsive pages. And again, not all browsers are alike or devices. So as you get your page, you want to learn to test it against your phone, Test your page against on your tablet. Test your page in multiple scenarios to see how it lays out. And that's something that you can very easily do if you're uploading your content regularly to the web host 000 site. Okay, now let's talk about structuring of your page. The heart of your page is structure. And we're going to be using in our site today 4 main sections to structure our page. We call the masthead. This is the element that it's the very top. And we're going to be using a header element. This is not to be confused with the head element. The header element was designed and added in HTML5 to represent that content that will be stored, displayed, presentation that will be displayed at the top of the page. Whereas the head tags store the metadata that isn't necessarily displayed, but it's used for display. So the head tag will have the reference links to your CSS or your JavaScript or other information. Your header element, again, this is going to be where we store possibly navigation or a banner or whatnot. And then we have the main. Now the main, we're going to be using div classes for this, and we're going to annotate our div with a class name of container. And the same thing for a sidebar. We'll annotate it with a class name of container. And then we have what's called the page footer. And here we'll use the footer element. Now these are the four main pieces, 4 main tags that we're going to use. But inside of each of these, the header, the div with the class container, and the div with the class container for your sidebar, you're going to store other element types that will be a reference from there. So this is how we're going to divide up the page. All right. So we have our body, and inside the body element, we're going to include 1 div to wrap that all. Okay, 1 div element to wrap it all. And inside the div, we'll have our header. And underneath the header, we'll have a main element. And the main element will be divided with section elements. And each section element is going to have a footer. And we're going to create a sidebar div. And this is going to contain an article and an aside element. And at the bottom, in the side main div, we're going to put a footer element with a copyright. So to kind of get our minds wrapped around this, let's go ahead and open up Atom. And I'm going to create a new folder to store this content, something brand new. So let me close these out. And let's see, I'll call this my fixed with layout. And inside my fixed with layout, I'm going to create a index.html. Can you all see what I'm typing right now? Okay. And of course, we'll just type HTML in Atom and it will populate the majority of that information. We're also going to go ahead and create in our fixed with layout another folder. And in that folder, we're going to put our CSS. And inside our CSS, we'll create a new file and we'll call this our main, let's see, main CSS. Now we want to reference our main CSS. So we type link. And I'm going to adjust the reference there. Main. And for a title, I'm just going to call this a fixed with width layout. All right, now we said some things that we're going to include on our page, right? Let's go back here for a moment and look at what we're going to include. So we're going to have a masthead, right? A main, a sidebar, and a page footer. All right? And we're going to do this first by inside of our body element, we're going to have a div that's going to wrap the entire page. Okay, so let's go back to Atom. And I'm going to type div. And because this div is going to wrap the entire page, we're going to go ahead and call this class our page class. All right, now we have our div. This wraps our entire page. So now we're going to create our header. And our header, we're going to give a class name as well, and we're going to call this our masthead. All right. And we're going to use the role, and this header is going to essentially be our banner. So we're going to use the predefined value of banner. Now inside of this, we'll use a p tag, and we're going to give it a class. We're going to use logo. And inside of our p tag, we're going to create a anchor element. And for this purpose, we're going to use, we're going to leave that just like that for right now. All right, now in our anchor element, we want a logo image, okay? So I don't have any images set up yet, but let's just go ahead, let's just put a text for right now. Just say logo image to be added here. Okay. So we've got a masthead, and other things that we want to add to our masthead is going to be an unordered list. So we'll type UL, and again, we're going to give our unordered list a class name. And for this one, we're going to call it social sites. And we'll have a list item. We'll just, we'll put F for Facebook. List item, let's see, I for Instagram. List item, T for Twitter. Now, there are actually icons that we can download on the web, and I may show you some samples that you can download for that. Okay, underneath our unordered list, we're going to go ahead and create another element. This is going to be a navigation element. And the navigation element, we're going to give it a role, and we're going to specify navigation. And we'll just create a quick set of links here. https://www.google.com. And in mine, I'm going to put a pipe symbol there. If you don't know what your pipe symbol is, it's right above your return key. You have a backspace and you have a pipe. It looks like a straight line, so that's where you can find it. So I'm going to do another one. https://www.yahoo.com. Yahoo. Oops. Do another pipe symbol. And I just need one more just for, let's see, https://www.bing.com. Okay. All right, so we have a header, right? Now, the next thing we're going to add to this is we're going to add, let's add a comment. Now, the reason we want to add comments is it helps us to visually separate what we've done so far. So we'll just type masthead, and we'll do this. All right, then we're going to do another div, and this is going to be for a container. And this div is going to have a main element. And this is going to have a role of main. Whoops. Now, there's a lot of stuff that we could put in here, okay? I don't want to get too tied up in this, but if you're needing to know what content to follow along with here, this is going to be in your textbook, I believe, around 426 or 427. There'll be some sample for you to follow. But for your section, you'll notice I'm annotating everything with the class because we're going to really be getting into the layout portion of this and how it's supposed to be visualized. Okay, so this is a section called post. It has an H1, and we're going to say sunny east garden at the Getty Villa. And there's an image. We don't really have an image yet, but I'm just going to leave it kind of blank, I suppose. Whoops. Class, post, photo, full. And I'll add a div, and we'll call this div our post blurb. And inside of that, we'll put a paragraph tag, and we are typing some blah, 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 whatever. I'm not too concerned about that. All right, so we have that. Now, according to what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that each of our sectional content has a footer. So we have our div that wraps around a p tag, and underneath the div, we're going to add a footer. And you guessed it, we're going to give it a class. Can anyone guess what we'll call the footer class? We'll call it footer. And inside of that, just some other text information. It could be more elements, it could be a number of things. Okay, so we have one section. I'm not going to go and create multiple sections like the image. We'll go on back down to the main. And after the main, I'm going to enter another comment. I'm going to say end of main. And underneath the main, we're going to create a sidebar. So I'm going to type div, and the class for the sidebar is going to be sidebar. Okay. And we want our sidebars to have semantically appropriate pieces of elements. So we're going to use an article, give it a class about. We'll use an H2 element, and we're going to say about me. And then you could have another div. And this div would say something. Well, let's change this one here to a P instead of a div. And maybe some information about me. Okay. So we have a div with a sidebar. We have an article, and we're going to put underneath the article another div, and we'll call this our mod. Inside of that, we'll have an H2, and this will be my travels, and I'm going to put a paragraph, but we possibly want to put image here. So put an image here of my travels. Okay. Now we have a sidebar. We have our main section. I'm going to close my sidebar, put a comment tag down here. Say end of sidebar. Okay, and if you're curious, you get lost in the document object model here. If you click on the element, Atom is going to highlight the end element. And if your text gets really messy, you can go down. You can right click on the page. Go down to Beautify Editor Contents, and it'll do a little bit of formatting for you. Okay, so I've got my sidebar in, and then down here, this is the closing div, and we're going to say this is the end of the container. And then under inside this div still, we're going to do a space above it, and we're going to put a footer. And this is the very bottom footer. And we're going to give this a role of, let's see, where's it at? Oh, content info. Okay. And inside that, we're going to do our P class. And the textbook is using a class here called legal. And then inside of that, we have a small text. And inside the small text, we have the ampersand, copy, semicolon. I'm going to do 2020, and le journal, ... Okay. We'll do another close tag. End of footer. Another closing comment tag, I mean. And then we're down here to this div. This is the end of the page. We have our body, and we have our HTML. Okay, That's a lot of content that we just kind of hand jammed out there. But I want to demonstrate what that looks like for a moment. So let me go back. Let me grab actually a new window, and I'm going to drag this over here. I'm going to go to File, open the file. So mine's in my CSS222. I created a new project, called it Fix with Layout. There's my index. Open it, and very basic content. Not a lot of details here at all, right? Okay, so let's go back for a moment. Let's go back to our structure. We have our basic structure laid out, and we have this code block that's, for the most part, it's laid out in Atom. Now let's kind of work through this as we go, all right? So the HTML elements that, that browsers typically support, not all browsers, they play fair. And so we have to use what sometimes is called a normalized script. Let me close something real quick. There we go. A normalized script, what it's going to do, a normalized CSS, what it's going to do is, for browsers that don't really do well with HTML5, or that don't support the HTML5 elements, like article, footer, header, and nav display, those elements are often displayed in line. And we're going to talk about display in block and display in line, what it means. But we want those elements to display as blocks. And so one of the first things that we're going to do is we're actually going to create a normalized script. And let's go ahead and do that now. Go back to our Atom, and in our main CSS, we're going to just put a, let's see, I'm going to put a quick comment. Normalize CSS. And so we need to specify those elements, right? So those elements that we are going to type, we're going to type, the selectors are article, comma, aside, comma, fig caption, figure, footer, header, main, nav, and section. And this is how we're going to normalize them. We're going to say display block. Now, we're going to talk about what display block does later, but we have this at the top of our CSS, and some sites actually give you, you can go out and download some normalized CSS, and it'll fix a lot of those things. But this is typically what you would do. You put it at the top of your page. Now, if we refresh our page, I'm not sure it's really going to do much. Let's see here. Yeah, my browser is already HTML5 compliant. But if you had like IE8 or IE9, I think you would actually see a significant difference there. All right, let's go back now again. And I want to look at some other things that you sometimes have to do. One of these is fixing, for IE9, we have this thing called a shiv or a shim. So you put in the top of your HTML this what is called a a conditional comment element, okay? So you'll use the HTML comment sequence, and then you do this bracket, and you say if it's LT less than IE and the version, close bracket, close the comment, right? And then anything in between, open the comment again, end if. Now you'll notice in this scenario, I put the dash dash after the end if. Typical comments will always have them here, but this is called a conditional comment. And so this is where we would wrap some type of JavaScript to be called if the browser was this version. Now, in your textbooks, you can look this up. I'm not really going to spend too much time on this, but because most browsers now are supporting, they're pretty up to date. But it's very possible that you may have customers who, or whoever you work for, they may ask you to create a site to support IE9 or some browser that doesn't have this, and this is what you would do. Now, alternatively, you can go to html5shiv.js. This is a open source GitHub project. By the way, GitHub is a great place to store all of your code. If you have code, websites you're working on, and you want to make sure you're backing it up, GitHub is a great place to back up your code. And it doesn't matter where you're at in the world, you can always go out to GitHub and download and reinstall your code. Purpose of this class, though, is not to teach how to use GitHub, but this is a great site to learn. In fact, if you know how to use GitHub, a lot of employers will give you a thumbs up. They'll really like you. All right, so this will help. And as well, like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but unless for some reason in the near future we go to HTML6 and we need a new shiv, this is the idea. There's also a modernizer CSS script that you could find here at this site, modernizer.com, that has good information. All right. One of the things you probably are going to notice, and it really depends on browser per browser, the default CSS style sheet that is included in the browser. The default CSS style sheet does certain things, meaning the browser is set to operate and display the presentation a certain way. And you often need a way to level the playing field so that your site will always appear the same on everyone's browsers. And there's two ways to do this. The first one's called reset. It's a styling sheet that you would put at the top of your page. And basically what it does is it resets all of the default padding and margins to 0. It enforces a particular style on your site so that everything is zeroed out. And this is very important. And the second, of course, is the normalized CSS. These are in the textbook. I encourage you to go out and get them. If you want me to send them to you in email or make them available on the Moodle site this week, I can do that as well. All right, so here's another example of the normalize script. And you'll notice at the top, it says normalize.css. It has a version number. It includes the license, the MIT license, and it tells you where you can get it at. And in this instance, it's at git.io normalize. That's the site you can find it at. So again, what are they doing? They're normalizing the article, aside, fig caption, figure, footer, so forth. They're setting it to display of block. This is because in some browsers that don't support HTML5, they'll display those elements as inline. And we're going to explain that more in a little bit. You have the HTML, and you have these prefixes. We're going to talk about those. This is a Microsoft prefix for this style. This means that Microsoft versions of browsers, they have a different expression of it. WebKit prefix. So you notice that it says text size adjust, but they both have the prefix attached to them. Then you have a body, a margin set to 0, your anchor focuses, outline, thin, and dotted. Active links and hover links are outlined to 0. Your small elements are set to a font size of 80%, which is going to set, if you remember, this is going to set it to 80% of the window size, the max size. And then, of course, your image, they have a border set of 0. This is a normalized script. This is very standard, and it helps you to squeeze things down. Now, you may be wondering, why do I need to set margins to 0? Why do I need to set borders around images to 0? Well, we're going to get into more of that, but when you look at a web page and you inspect the DOM on that web page, you might have set a particular width for an image to be, say, 50 pixels or 100 pixels or whatever. But then when you hover over it with the inspect, it says 56 pixels. And you're like, well, why is it doing that? What's going on? Well, the width interpreted on the browser screen is the padding plus the margin plus the width of the image. And this is a way of normalizing all of that, resetting it to 0. Okay, let's talk about box model. Again, this is to help you kind of understand what's happening with your sizing. Inside this blue line is the actual element. Okay? And outside of that, when you would apply a padding, it would be the next layer up. So you have padding top, padding left, padding bottom, padding right. That padding increases the width and the height. If you apply a border, that border also has a sizing. So again, you have to take into account what the border parameter would be. And then outside of that is what you call the margin. This is where you want the content or the element to be either scooted to the left or the right, based top or the bottom, based on the margin. So this is the box model, and it's very important to kind of wrap your head around this box model, because the elements on the page, all elements on the page, use this box model. Okay, so it uses the width, the padding, the border, the margin, and properties to address the box model. All right, any questions about this? This is very important, by the way. You guys are all geniuses. I love it. Okay, let's move on. So I just mentioned this, but the browser width does not necessarily match the property width unless no padding or borders are there. So let me go back. So when the browser measures something, it's going to measure from this edge, from the border to the border. That means that the width you may have specified for particular content won't be the true width that's displayed on the screen, because you'll have this extra padding on the padding left and the border left. Okay? Width only dictates the width of the content area inside the padding. So elements display width on the browser screen is determined. The total width is content, padding, plus border. Display height works the same way. It's the same process. It'd be the content with the padding height and the border height, right? Okay. A more intuitive way to do this is use the property box sizing. Box sizing. And what we want to specify is border box. And what this means is that the width and the height now encompass everything around that element. Okay? That's box sizing. All right, so this is where we get into the question of your, what I mentioned a minute ago about how we want to normalize things. The property display has a value of block, inline, list item, inline block, or none. If you set the display property value to block, it will display the element on its own line. So for example, think about the EM element, right? The emphasis element. When you wrap a piece of text with emphasis, it doesn't pop it down to a new line. It keeps it on the same line. So an EM element or a strong element or a cite element, they display inline. Whereas the H1, the H6, and the paragraph, they display on their own lines. So this is why we told the article, the footer, the header, the main, all of these to have a display of property of block, right? Because we want them to each appear on their own line if you use them. Now, you can tell an element as well to display inline. And when you do that, you take away that new line character from it, or that ability to push it down, and display inline forces that element back up on the same line. For display with a property of list item, you only want to use this on lines that are used for list items, like when we're using the unordered list or the list item value. If you use the display inline block, what inline block does is it makes the element appear in line, but it has the same properties of blocks, meaning you can set padding, you can set border, you can do things like that. And then you can also say display none. And display none, it neither displays the element or it takes up any visual space where the element was. Let's look at an example here. Here is with visibility property. A visibility property is very similar. Visibility, you can say, you can give it a value of hidden. And the difference between display none and visibility hidden is that visibility hidden will show the space, whereas display none removes the space. So imagine with me that there is a there's an object here that you're saying display none. You can see that the spacing is actually smaller than here where the visibility property is used. So visibility EM, or visibility hidden on an EM element, it still keeps the same spacing. It's just it doesn't show it. The other thing you need to remember is that visibility or display properties, they affect all descendants within the element set. All descendants within the element set. Okay. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go back. I don't want to get too far ahead here. Let's see. Yeah. No, we're right on target. Okay. So we have two properties here, and we're going to use these properties on our page. We have a main, which is the selector that refers to the main element, and we have a sidebar, which is the class that refers to the div that has the class sidebar specified. All right. Before we do this, your width, they can be PXs, they can be EMs, they can be percentages, or they can be auto. Auto lets the browser calculate the height or the width. By the way, this is the default, right? So let's jump back to Atom, and we're going to I lost my place here. Okay, so let's go ahead and come in here. And the first thing we're going to do is say P and display inline. Go ahead and refresh. And you can see that that scooched the elements up. It took the block out of it. And then we're going to say EM. We're going to say display block. Save it. And I don't think I have any EMs in here. No, I don't. Let's take that one back out for a moment. Okay. Here we go. So we're going to go ahead and address our social sites at the top. We'll say social.sites, li, and we're going to give this a display of inline, and then our nav main, and we'll give this a display of inline block. Then we're going to come down to nav main alpha. And we're going to specify some color. And let's use the color out of the textbook here, 2929. We'll give it a display of inline block. Go ahead and specify our font family. And we're going to use Open Sans and sans serif. Our font size is going to be what? 1.25 EM. Do you guys remember what how we get to this information? 1.25 EM. You know what that would be in pixel?
Things divided by 16?
Yeah, so it's the font divided by 16 gives us that. So if we want to reverse it, we would say 16 times 1.25 EM, and that would give us the actual pixel size of that. All right, so we're going to do font weight. And for our font weight, we'll say 700. Oops. 700. And our text transform, we use uppercase. All right. So let's go ahead and refresh what we have. And really not a lot has happened other than Facebook and Instagram and Twitter now have went from this way to this way. And the reason for that is that we've specified that the LI is inline. Now, if we took the LI and we said block, and saved that and refreshed it, this fit is going to go back down the other way. See that? So again, we're taking the block away and forcing things up onto the same line, whereas block makes everything have its own line. All right, so I'm going to revert this. And nav main alpha, let me go back to our index, make sure we have things specified correctly. Nav we don't have a We don't have a content specified as nav main alpha, do we? That's because the class for that would be here. So we'd say class nav main. Whoops, what happened? I just closed it. There we go, nav main. All right, I was missing the class. So now if we refresh it, this Google, Yahoo, and Fit should also change its orientation. Well, somewhat, right? It's applied the font to it. I think that was because I'm not using yeah, it's all right. Okay, so let's think about this here. So far, everything is looking good. Got our main CS, got this information specified. Let's go ahead and add now some styling for our main. We're going to say width 600 px, and our sidebar a width of 300 px. Okay. Now, eventually, we're going to switch this column right here, about me and my travels, over here to the right. But for right now, it's all going to still be in the same spot. And of course, refreshing it is not going to change very much. So let's see here. The next item that we want to add concerns our border box, but let's go ahead and jump back to our lecture for a moment. So we've added our main, our sidebar, we set the width and the height of the elements. Yeah, now we get to our border box. All right, so I mentioned this a minute ago. These prefixes that you see of WebKit and Moz, these prefixes, they allow properties to be supported by older Android, iOS, and Firefox browsers. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and apply the border box to this. So we'll go back again. And we're going to use a wildcard selector. We'll say WebKit box sizing border box. Then we're going to specify a Mozilla box sizing, again with the property border box. And then finally, we fall through. Remember, everything cascades down, right? So finally, we're going to cascade through to box sizing with a border box. Now, keep in mind that everything cascades down. So if I was on an Android device, it would read this first one and apply it. It would get to the next one and go, I don't know that one, and I don't know that one. And so it falls through. Whereas on Chrome, Chrome may actually recognize WebKit and Mozilla, but it also recognizes box sizing. And so you always want to put the HTML5 property last in line with the prefixes, right? I still don't think this is going to affect anything with our styling. Nope. Hasn't affected anything yet. All right, let's go back to our lecture again. So that's our border box. Now we're going to talk about padding. All right, so again, padding, it adds the extra space around the element. And we're going to be adding an about with a background color of 2B, 2B, 2B. And then we're going to be padding with this syntax. Now, if you let me explain the padding, how we're using this. Padding is a shorthand property for padding left, padding right, padding top, padding bottom, right? If you use padding with one value, it's going to apply to all sides of the object. If you use two values, one of the values will apply to the top and the bottom, and the second will apply to the left and the right. The way padding works is it's clockwise. So it goes top, right and left, and then bottom. Okay, top, right and left, and then bottom. So in this instance, you have top, right and left, and then bottom. Actually, it's top, right, left, and we haven't specified a bottom. So this padding won't have a bottom on it. All right. Let's go ahead and go back to Adam again, and we're going to add the padding that we need to add, right? Let's see, where did it go? Here it is. So we'll type about, and we're going to give a background color. We're going to use the hex, and it's going to be 2B, 2B, 2B. And we're going to say padding, 0.3125 EM. Whoops. 3125.625 EM. 0.625 EM. Okay. We'll save that. Again, nothing much happening here. There's one other piece that we need to add to our document. We'll go ahead and put this above the about. Excuse me as I make a mistake here. This is supposed to be a class. All right, let's refresh that again. So we have some background stuff going on now, right? Background color is set, padding is set. So let's add in some other information for our div. So we're going to type div. And here we're going to give a background of khaki. And we're going to specify a width of 300 pixels. Below that, we're going to say P, comma, second, and we're going to give this a background. We're going to just say white. And below that, we're going to say border, 3px, solid, royal blue. And we're going to give a margin of 10px and a padding of 8px. Now remember, if I only apply it one time, this is for both margin and padding, it applies that amount to all four sides. Okay? And then we're going to do, again, another second. And in this one, we're going to say border color is orange red with a width of 200 px. All right. Let's go ahead and see where we're at now. Whoa. Some strangeness going on, right? Yeah. So if we compare our styles here, let's see. Let me do something for a moment. I'm not sure if we needed that one display. There we go. That's better. So this one P display, I think, was giving us, I added it in there by mistake. So comment out or remove, just comment it out for right now, the P display at the top of your CSS. Okay. So let's go back and look one more time at our lecture. So we have setting the border. Now, your border, if you want to create a border around an element, all sides, you can set the thickness, you can set the style, the color. And again, border is a shorthand property. So you'll notice here, I'm saying border 1px solid red. This is a typical way you could do it. Or it could be 2px inset as a style. So border can be applied to any element. Okay, you can apply it to an EM, you can apply it to an image, a header, any element on the page that has a tag element. Border, as I said, is a shorthand for border top, border bottom, border left, border right, border width, border height, border color, border style. And your border styles, you have a lot of variations as well. You can use none, you can use dotted, you can use dashed, solid, double, groove, ridge, inset, or outset. There's a lot of variations that you can use there. Okay, let's go back one more time, and we're going to edit. Let's see, what is our next one? Margins and elements. Yeah, we're almost there. So let's go back one more time to Atom, and we're going to edit this main nav that's right here, and we're going to add another property, and we're going to say padding, and we're going to specify 5 EM, 1.15 EM space 0.5 EM space 1.4 EM. We're going to put the semicolon at the end. And then we're going to add a new one. Come down here to the bottom. Address our links. And we're going to set a padding on this one, padding left. And we're going to say 0. Do we already have a links up here anywhere? Did I miss that? Maybe I missed it. And then the next one we're going to add is a width of 270 px. All right. Our styling is coming along. It still looks a little quirky right now, but let's continue to play with it. So we've added the padding here. We've added this padding in the main nav up here, right? Yeah. So things are slowly coming along, Now, what I want to do, I'm going to go over here and we're just going to add a new folder, and I'm going to call this our our images folder. And I want an image. I'm just going to grab my image from my website folder, and I think one of these will do. See, those are kind of big, but I think this will be fine. All right. Yeah, that'll be nice for a header, for a banner, right? So I'm clicking rename, but that's just to copy the reference. And I'm going to go back into my index HTML, and I have in here logo to be added, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and remove that. Type image. It's going to treat me like that, huh? Let me do it this way. There we go. And I'm going to specify the images folder, paste in the name, and it's a ping file, right? I've saved it. Let me refresh. And it's a little too big, isn't it? Yeah. So let's see here. Let's see. Go into our main. We got header, masthead, PA image. So masthead. Do we have a style class for masthead? I thought maybe we did. It's kind of weird how that doesn't line up. All right. I'm not too worried about it. Should be right there, though. Let's see. Guys, I'm thinking because my image is too big and I want to resize it down. Let's see. Masthead, alpha, image, with inherit. Let's see if that'll work. Oh, it's not going to work. Why is it not going to work? Let's see. We've got masthead. Masthead P, alpha image. Let's change this. It's class logo. What is our main? Our main is 600 pixels. All right, we're going to come back to that one in a minute. Okay, let's see here. Now we've talked about setting the border, right? So we can set the border different ways. So let's go ahead and apply some more styling to our nav main. So go back to Atom again. And we're going to create, let's see, a new one right here, nav main. And we're going to say border top is 5px solid, and this is our 019443, and border bottom 1px solid C8 C8 C8. And then inside of our main LI, we're going to add another one, border left is 1px solid with the same color, C8 C8 C8. And then we're going to go down to our nav main list. We're going to have to add a pseudo class. So we'll say nav main li first child, and we're going to say border left is none. Okay. Is everyone following along with me so far? Okay. So we refresh it. We've got a little bit of this color here. Wish I had some nice icons that would make it look prettier, but it is what it is. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and add one more thing to our nav main. We're going to say padding 0.45 0 5 EM. Let me go back. This is an EM, by the way. And we'll do that. Okay, add a little bit more padding to the layout, to our nav main. All right. Now go to the top up here. Let's see. Does it matter? I don't think it matters. We'll go down here because we already specified an about. So type about H2, comma, mod H2, and we're going to give a font size of 0.875 EM. We're going to type another set of selectors, about H2, mod H2, nav main, anchor, and we're going to specify font. Let's see, some of this we've already added up here, haven't we? Yeah, I'm going to copy because I don't like to keep retyping. And then I'm going to remove what is not needed for this bottom piece. All right, so we have that. We don't need the font size. We don't need the padding. Okay, and we're going to add another mod, H2. This is going to be border bottom, 1px, solid, and db, and padding bottom of 0.75 EM. Okay. This is, at this point, it's starting to get kind of hairy, right? There's a lot going on here. So let's refresh and see how we're doing. Some things are moving around. We've got the text now in blue highlighted here. Okay. We got my travels right here, right? And down at the bottom, there is some more stuff. Now, what we don't have happening yet is we don't have the popular post or recent share because we didn't create those in the page. We tried to keep it somewhat simple. All right. We're going to go ahead and now address the footer and the post footer and add some styles, and then we're going to jump back into the lecture again. So underneath this, we'll add another one. We'll say footer, paragraph, font size is 0.6875 EM. And then we're going to create a post footer. This is going to be border bottom, 1px, solid, db, border top, 1px, solid, db. Okay. Padding bottom, 0.7 EM, and padding top, 0.7 EM. Okay. I know we're moving quick. But we're getting closer. Let me go back to my index HTML real quick. And we don't have the class on here called footer. So we need to add that. What else did we add here? Post footer. I'm not sure where post footer was because I didn't see that in our code earlier. We'll keep this for right now, but obviously that's a little strange. All right, so we refresh. We got footer, P small. It's bizarre. Oh, did you guys see what I did? Forgot the curly bracket. Make sure you have your curly brackets there because that'll throw you off. All right, we'll refresh it again. There we go. We've affected our post footer now. Change the style on it. Okay. There are some other things that you can do with borders like dashes and dots and ridges and grooves. We're not going to be doing that. If you're needing to look at what those are, if you think about, well, let me just go ahead and do a groove so you can see. So we got a, let's see, this is a good one. We'll just do it here. Groove. If you change that in your mod H2 and you refresh it, you will see that that has now become a groove down at the bottom. And if you want to really blow it up so you can see what it looks like, you can change that from 1 pixel to 10. And that is a groove. I don't want you to fall in the groove, though. Don't get in the groove. That was a joke. All right. Anyways, we'll go and change that back. My son would have said, "Oh, Dad, that's so cringe." All right. Here we go. So we're back. Get that back to normal. Yep, there's our regular border. All right. So we've defined a lot of border styles. We've talked about the different things you could do there. Let's see. We got this. We don't have an image because we never put one. But let's go ahead and find our H1. Where's our H1 at? I don't think we ever addressed it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and create an H1. Selector. Whoops. There we go. And we're going to address the color. We're going to change the color to 212121. We'll change the font family to Lato sans serif. The font size will be 3.25 EM. The font weight will be 300. The letter spacing, if you remember what letter spacing does, right? It adds 2 pixels. This property here is going to put 2 pixels per each letter concerning that H1 element. All right, so a line height. Line height changes the value of that. We're going to change it to 975. And the margin bottom, we're going to say 0.4125 EM. Okay. So there we've changed it now. You can see the actual spacing it puts in between it, right? Okay. And we have our links right here. The text here has a map. I don't think we have a class called map, but I'm going to add it just so we're keeping up with what it's doing. And inside of our links, we're going to add a margin. And this is going to be 1.5 EM 4.125 EM. And We have a links li somewhere. Maybe it's down. Let's see. Links li. Nope. There's our links. So no links li. All right. So we'll create it. Links li. And we're going to give this a margin bottom 1.1 EM. Okay. So our links li is going to, of course, address we have a links on this page. Yeah, we don't have a links on the page either. All right, so let's go ahead and refresh where we're at. No changes. Let's go ahead and move again. And we're going to go ahead and specify now a margin for the page. So this is the class page right here on this div. And this div wraps everything all the way around. So we're going to specify now that this page has a margin. So we'll give it, let me first search for this. Do I have page anywhere? No? Okay, so page, and we're going to specify the border for our page is 1px. Solid and red. And now we're going to specify our margin of 0 and auto, and our width of 960 px. Okay. Think about 0 and margin. Remember, the first one, if you only have two values, it is top and bottom, left and right, right? And so we're specifying the width for the page is 960. We're specifying margin as to zero it out and to, let's see, zero it out and to auto it, right? So let's refresh it. Now that looks more, you know, more normalized, right? Sort of, almost. It's a little different, but it's looking better, okay? All right, so the next thing we're going to be getting into is floating, and I want to go back to the slides here for a moment. We've set the border, we've talked about margins, we set the margins down. Again, you can set your margins with PX, with EMs, percentages, or auto, just like we just did. But now we're actually going to talk about floating. Makes me want to look outside and see the sun, sunshine, blue skies, maybe going out to the beach and floating, right? No, this is not that kind of floating. This is, you can apply a float to a property. It could be images, it could be anything. And what it'll do is it'll cause the text to float around the property that you've told it to float, okay? And we're going to be applying that now to our page that we've been working through. So let's go ahead and go back again to our browser. I'm going to pull this over a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. And you'll notice because we have fixed width, it's scrolling left and right, right? It's not responsive, it's fixed. So keep that in mind when you're doing your styles. Fixed width is sometimes not a good thing, but for us to learn this layout, that's what we're going to do. Okay, so we want to, we don't have any post photos in here. So where's our posts at? Let's see. I have a section called post, and there's an image here, but I don't have an image. Let me go down and grab, I'm going to grab what? Let's see. There's the CNMI. The CNMI looks like a good image to grab. I'm going to put that in my images directory. And there's an NMC JPEG. That's a good one to put in there. I'll grab the flag as well. Okay, so I've got a couple of images. I'm going to go down to the post section, and I'm going to add this image. So again, we'll reference relative path images, and I'm going to put the NMC JPEG. Save it, refresh it. There it is. There's the NMC JPEG. That's our sunny East Garden villa. Yeah. So now we need to address the float, though. And so we'll go back to our main CS. We're going to type post photo, and we're going to say float left. We're going to give a margin bottom of 2 pixels and a margin right of 22 pixels. Now, I'm not sure if we put a style class on our photo. Did we do that? Yeah, we did. It's right there, post photo. All right, so we've saved everything. So let's go ahead and refresh it. Didn't really do a lot, right? Because we don't have a lot of text. If we had a lot of text, then it would wrap. So let's go back up to our index, and let's see here. I've got, where did I have that extra text at? It was in my other index HTML, right? Just going to grab this fake text real quick. Close that and paste that in there. Save it. Refresh it. Now it's like this. So what do we need? What are we missing there? What are we missing? I think if we inspect this, I think we've added in some test. So we have border. Right? We have margin. I want the margin still. There's the padding. I want the padding. Because if you notice, when you click on this, you can see that the padding is the text element as I hover over it, right? That's the content where the padding is at. If I take away the padding, it kind of makes it look a little yucky. Padding gives us that extra padding, right? Okay, so we'll come back to that in a moment. But I am going to go back to my main CSS and go to my border here of royal blue and comment that out. So I'm on P second, and I'm commenting the royal blue out, right? Because I don't want that. And if I refresh, there, the royal blue is gone. Okay. All right, so let's now add the padding to the main. So we have the main up here. We have our width of 600. I'm going to say float the main to the left. And we want to float the sidebar to the right. And we're going to go ahead and add a margin top of 1.875 EM. Okay. Now, I've told the main, which is basically this content right here, to stay floated to the left. And I've told the sidebar, which is this content down here, to be floated to the right. When we refresh, let me close that out there. When we refresh, you should see what I'm talking about. What am I missing? I feel like I'm missing something. Let me go back and look at this again. Float, left, width is 600 pixels. See our sidebar, float right, margin top. All right, let's inspect and see what we got going on. This is the part of web development where you have to kind of look into it a little bit. All right, so here's our sidebar. So why isn't our sidebar floating? There's our float. If I hover over it, it tells me the section that we're expecting it to float. And what is this right here? This is let's put that in a paragraph. This inside the footer of your main section post. So I'm going to take that and put it inside of a footer. Okay. There we go. It's a little better, but for whatever reason, we're still not floating. Okay. Let's inspect it again. So we have the About Me. This is the sidebar. So div class, sidebar, about, and me. All right, let's go look at our CSS. So we have sidebar, and down here we have about. We have an about H2. Okay. Let's see. There's about H2. Div is khaki. Second. Has anyone found it? What may be causing it? Y'all are looking at me like, we don't know. This is the part of web development that is often some of the most infuriating and frustrating, because it's usually just a tiny, tiny little change in your code that you might have missed. Now, what I am noticing here is main. Let's see, there's main.
What if main's overlapping with the sidebar? Because it's main, and it's just overruling the sidebar float.
You think it is?
I'm just guessing at this point, but I
Yeah.
think it is. So what if you float right with main?
Well, let's do this. Let's comment it out. I think it's a good catch. Now that's a lot more. It's closer. So here's our main. See, we want main to float left, and we want sidebar to float right. So let's see here. Float margin top. We got everything set there. Div khaki is 300 pixels. I'll tell you that I have a suspicion I didn't do what I was hoping. Oops. Well, guys, it's 5:22. Let me go ahead and push back into the lecture a little bit. And what I want to do, what we can address later, is the sample of how to make the float left and the float right work. So I will post the correction for that later in a separate video. But let's go ahead and get through the rest of the content, and then we'll come back and address that. In all of my years of web development, what I've always seen happen is it's one tiny little piece of misplaced code. Just one token will throw everything off. All right, there's other elements here that I want to make sure that you guys are exposed to in this section. And the one that is important is the position. So you have position absolute, relative, and fixed. And what position does is it forces a piece of text to be exactly where you tell it to be on the screen. Now, the position property, of course, again, you have the three values that you can have. And of course, you can put none if you're going to remove the positioning. When you specify a position of absolute, you must specify a secondary property of either top, right, bottom, or left. And with that property, you have to specify a distance from that location. So for example, if you specify a position of absolute, and then you use the top property, it will automatically be all the way over to the left side at the top. And so the item will sit at that location. You can specify a top and a left. You can specify a top and a right. You can specify a bottom and a left, or a bottom and a right. You cannot specify both top and bottom together. And you can't specify right and left together at the same time, because one will cascade over the other, and the last one that's present will be used. So that's how you would use it. In general, let me go back here real quick, and we'll use our current project to demonstrate a quick example of this. We have at the top of our page here this image, and this image is right here in this logo. If I wanted to break the image out and move it somewhere else, what I'm going to do just for quick demonstration is I'm going to say class, and I'm going to say my image, okay? And in the main CSS, I'm going to come up here to the top, and I'm going to specify my image. I'm going to give a position of absolute, and I'm going to specify where it's going to be. And so here I will specify 10. Let's do this. Let's do 400 pixels from the top. And now the image is moved. I don't know if you can see it on your screen. Now it's moved those 400 pixels. Similarly, you can specify a left with this. Let's just say 10 pixels. And now we've set the coordinates where this image is. Now, the coordinates are based on the top right corner. Excuse me, top left corner. Because I've specified 10 pixels from the left and 400 from the top. Absolute gives you a way to move things around when it's necessary. I'm going to tell you, though, that it's almost never recommended to use positioning in this way. You always want, if you're going to use an absolute, you must first, or let me just say this, it's recommended to nest the absolute location in something that in general will be fixed and unmoving. So let's go back to my index here. I have the header class masthead. So I'm going to come in here and find my masthead. I think my masthead was down here, wasn't it? I'll just search for it. Oh, it was never referenced. Wonderful. All right, so we'll just come up here and we'll say masthead position relative. Now, what that does, because image is a child of masthead, when you refresh, you'll notice that it automatically moved it over to the relative position of the masthead. And actually what it's done is it's moved it 400 pixels from the reference of where masthead was at, because here's masthead and here is the class my image. So it's using the relative location and it's measuring off of that. This is the way that relative positioning works. All right, let's go back to the slides real quick. That is our position, and that's actually the last slide for today. Now, we've talked about positioning relatively. You can position absolutely. The other thing that you can do in positioning is you can position elements in a stack. And the way you do that is you specify a z-index. And what the z-index does is it gives you the ability to lay multiple things on top of each other. And so you can actually overlay items right over top of each other and so forth. Okay. Guys, that's all we have for today. There's 2 assignments this week. There's the Chapter 10 assignment and the Chapter 11 assignment. If you don't have any further questions, I'm going to go ahead and close down the class for today. All right.
Sir.
Yep. You all take care.
See you next week.
See you next week.